All of you know of Sidna Brower Mitchell, and if you don't know her personally, she was the editor from 1962 to 1963. She wrote what I think we all can agree the most famous editorial in the 100-year history of the Mississippian. Because she wrote that editorial right after the riots involving James Meredith's entry into Ole Miss, she was censured by the campus senate. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and she was recognized around the world for her courage. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote this about Sidna in 1962. It takes some courage for a young editor to stand up to the yowls of a mob and the mummery of the authorities in a racially inflamed situation, especially when the editor is a young woman. The campus senate rescinded your censure 40 years later. And so I have a question I'd like to ask you, Sidna. Did any members of the original campus senate that did censure you ever come to you and say they were sorry or that they were wrong?
Before I answer that question, I would just like to follow up on something Jimmy said. At the 75th anniversary, Ed Williams noted that those of us who stayed in journalism left Mississippi. Those that stayed in Mississippi became lawyers. And that seems very true.
Well, I'm pleased that in this room are some journalists who didn't leave Mississippi, but there is a lot of truth to that.
To answer your question, yes. I did get some folks who admitted that they were running for the state legislature, and they thought that would benefit their campaign. I moved to New York, and about 2 o'clock, I think it was, one morning, I got a call from a very drunk congressman, and I won't give his name, but who
doesn't narrow the field down very much.
It could have been anybody.
Who apologized, saying that for the things that he said about me, but he thought that would be helpful in his election. So,
you know, reading that editorial today, it seems fairly tame by today's standards. What thoughts do you have about then and now? I know it took a lot of courage then. Your thoughts coming back to Mississippi, as you have a number of times, about the difference then and now. Could you even have envisioned it would be so different?
No, not at all. And in fact, there was a number of years where I did not come back to Ole Miss because I did not feel I was welcome. And I must say, after that censure was repealed, it was sort of like a whole world opening up, and it was wonderful. I think basically my editorials were saying, don't riot, boys. Obey the law. But it really taught me to look at the big picture. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes the so-called journalists don't look at the big picture when they're writing or they're reporting. And I wish they would.
Good, thank you. You were generously gave papers to Ole Miss, I think yesterday. It was announced that you were going to do that. Anything in those papers that we would be surprised at, or something that particularly stands out for you?
Oh, you know, a lot of the letters, unfortunately, I never had time to read. And although some of my staff did, because the desk was right out in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, that's how I got accused of announcing the nomination for the Pulitzer Prize. I did not do that. Someone went to my desk, found that, and then reported. She's been forgiven. But it's just the encouragement primarily from Mississippian editors in those days, because they were taking a risk of coming out and supporting me, or saying that they agreed with what I had written. And to me, that was so important then and even now as I reread some.